resume our recording. And Rebecca, I am going to mute myself. I'm going to turn it over to you. If for any reason we get a question in the chat box, or if I can't hear you, I will interrupt you. But thank you so much for being here. And we look forward to your information.
Thank you. Thank you, Wendy. And thank you for having me. Hello, everyone. It's good to see everyone this morning. I hope everybody's safe and warm and cozy with either a real fire or a space heater like I have at my feet. So yeah, Wendy asked me if I would be willing to come and just share a bit about, you know, the stresses that we're all kind of under and how we can maintain some tenacity, right, in our mental wellness and in our relationships. And the academic in me just could not quite not do a PowerPoint. So I hope you'll indulge me. I've got a very small PowerPoint that I'd like to share and just kind of walk through a couple of things with you to think about and maybe apply in your life that might benefit yourself, your family, your work environment, your other relationships. So I'm going to share my screen really quickly. Okay. So of course, mental health is my, oops, that's ahead of me. There we go. Mental health is a focus of mine, as well as families and youth in particular, and communities based in resilience. So we're going to talk about a little bit about mental health, and kind of, it's going to seem like we're not talking about mental health because we're not going to delve into diagnoses and things like that. Mental health is everywhere because mental health is in us. That's a part of who we are. Our mental health and well-being is just as much a part of us as our physical health and well-being. And we all live in systems. And so this is an adaptation from Bronfenbrenner's biopsychosocial model. The idea, it's based in children here at the core of a child and youth, but because I just really coordinated with my colors, so I had to choose this one. You can see yourself even in that center circle as the individual is really what that represents. And we're all nested within a family, right? We, one way or another, family by choice or family of origin or what have you, we're all nested in that family. And it can be family of cousins, it can be any kind of, you know, family of friends, it can be any kind of family unit that you are very close to. And then inside of that, or outside of that, we're nested in other systems, right? So we're nested in the education system, our doctors, physicians, and nurses. We're nested in our faith-based communities. And then the next level is our neighborhood, our broader communities. You know, it used to be our neighborhoods probably in some instances are still on that third ring. But the way culture is today, most of them are going to be on that fourth ring, and just the broader community. So it may be the broader community of your zip code or your area of town or the city at large. And then the largest outside circle there is those processes that influence the systems in which we are in. So those can be social, economic, and cultural context and policies. So that's both how we live, how we engage, but also the policies that drive that of how we live and how we engage. And I share this because we're going to talk a little bit about communication and relationships between the systems and how that can benefit and strengthen our well-being as an individual and ultimately a well-being of our families and those systems that we are a part of. So for us individually, we have these typical pressures, right? And these are all a little bit exacerbated at times because of the pandemic. And like Wendy mentioned, you know, we're maybe, you know, pandemic surviving when we really want to be pandemic thriving. And so we need to be cognizant of the pressures that we're feeling and see how we can respond to them to bring about that thriving trajectory. So these are some typical pressures. I imagine I could put a whole bunch more arrows and a whole bunch more words on here, but in general, we're going to have our work-life pressures, right? Work-life balance, all the stressors we have at work, with all the stressors we have in our day-to-day life, and how we are dealing with each of those individually and how they intersect for us. Relationships, right? So relationships can really be strained during this time, particularly if you're having to quarantine or isolate, particularly if you already had maybe some struggles that are unresolved. This is an added layer of stress that can really put a little fuel on that fire. Expectations can create pressures for us, right? So expectations on ourselves, expectations on our family, expectations on our coworkers, and those can be our expectations going outward and system expectations coming inward, right? So a system expectation coming inward example is education. So the system suddenly is in our home, right? And our kids are doing school online. And that expectation is kind of permeating the walls of our home. And it has an impact in that situation. And so it's important to understand that our expectations, we kind of find a rhythm with them. And when we have additional stressors and pressures and things shift in a way that are very unexpected, then those expectations can start to feel unmanageable and unpredictable. So anytime you can kind of focus on what an expectation might be, or rules and routines and rituals, right? So what do we have coming up? What is going to be our daily routine? What is my weekly routine? I really love how Wendy is clarifying, this is what we're doing now. Next, we will be moving into this phase of monthly. That's great. And that's exactly what you want to do with families. You can do that as a leader in your work environment. You can do this with your children. You can do this with parents. You can do this with every relationship that you have. And then of course, stability. We are literally living in a time that our foundation is uncertainty. The vaccination has brought in some certainty, and I think that has created a little steadier ground for us to stand on, which is bringing back more hope, and that's very helpful, and we're excited about that. But our stability is not yet returned, right? So I do a gratitude list every morning, and this morning, one of the things that I stated was safety and stability. That we've been able to establish safety and stability in the way that we function as a family and in the way that we function as a corporation. And that has brought a lot of peace and solid foundation for me to continue to be effective in my various roles. So what we want to do is we want to really find mental health and wellness. So we know the stresses and pressures that are coming at us, right? It was pretty easy often for us. Sometimes we don't think about it though. So it is important to stop and think about why am I feeling stressed? What is happening for me right now? And then we can go to, okay, now what do I need to do? So here, just again, I could put more arrows and more words up here, but just as a quick overview of a couple things. One, balance, right? What brings you balance? Find that thing. Is it exercise? Is it, and in fact, I would say it's probably multiple things. There's probably something physical, maybe something spiritual or higher power type of connection, probably something also emotional, relational, and financial, right? So what are the things that bring balance to those areas in your life, and be intentional about implementing them? Make sure that you reach out for social support as you need it, but also recognize that there may be this drive to overconnect and during this time because we're physically distanced. And so recognize your vulnerabilities and make sure you're connecting with those that are supportive and are having your best interests at heart, and that you can really lean on and allow them to lean on, and kind of like how we can lean wood against wood and it stays up, right? Same kind of idea. We want to make sure we have healthy boundaries. Boundaries are not to control others, and they're not to say what job you will or will not do in your job description, but they are there to help you take care of yourself and to take care of your family. So you might have a boundary like, no screen time after 7 p.m., right? So that really disconnects this kind of Zoom world we all live in for all of us to have a break. That might be for you, might be for your kids. And this allows us to take care of ourselves, to bring wellness and stability. And it's important to understand that setting a boundary is great, but we have to uphold it, right? So if you set a boundary and you don't uphold it, then it's really not worth anything. So make sure whatever boundary you uphold to keep yourself well and your family well, you uphold it for the sake of your wellness. And then communication, which I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth, so I won't go much here, but communication is a pretty challenging construct. It is the vehicle by which we have our relationships with one another, in families, in work, in faith-based communities, everywhere, right? Relationships are the way that we engage and interact, and communication is the means by which we do that. I had the opportunity to transcribe a focus group interview, and I would play 10 seconds and type it in, and I'd rewind those 10 seconds and I'd play it again, and I'd fix and add what I missed or what I got wrong. And I can't tell you how many times I had to do 10-second segments at a time. And I was listening over and over and over and still picking up information that was shared. So we're trying to communicate in real time, quick disconnect, right? Just saying, hey, did you send that file? I didn't get it, and those kinds of communications. I mean, that's pretty direct and simple, but communications that have more than just those words too, right? And we'll talk about that. So that's something to consider, and that's going to be our focus. After I cover a couple different things. Mornings, my little grace. So some of the things that can happen when we start to not take care of our wellness, when these stressors and pressures, am I frozen? Am I okay? Okay, good. Some of these pressures, when we're not taking care of them, they can start to bring some impact on us that can raise our anxiety or raise our sadness or grief into levels of depression. And some symptoms of that, are going to be, maybe isolating, excessive sleeping, maybe angry outbursts. Those can be symptoms of either one. So it's very important to do screenings, to go into your physician or go to a therapist and get a screening or an evaluation done if you start to feel overwhelmed. I'm going to show you a couple places you can do that. On these other sides, substance use is something that people will use to cope. And while having a glass of wine occasionally or a beer or something like that is okay, it's important to understand that excessive use of substances can become a problem. And it's often what happens is that people are using these substances to self-medicate for anxiety or depression. It is maybe subclinical or just a substance, but actually what can happen is it can snowball and end up creating a more complex issue. Additionally, people can become pretty overwhelmed. We're all surviving, some of us thriving, but some are not surviving. They're barely hanging on. And so their symptoms, they're dependent upon both their experiences from their systems and their experiences internally. Suicide ideation can occur. And I want to touch on that because we do have, our team is doing a QPR training upcoming for this group. It's question, persuade, refer. It's a great way to walk individuals through talking about if they're having suicide ideation and helping them get help. So I strongly encourage you to attend that training, and it is very, very helpful. I've used the tools numerous times, and it truly saves lives, and it's very, very important. It's the most preventable form of death, and we can make a difference by learning how to do that and getting comfortable in having those conversations that bring in hope and help people to get through that crisis. So in asking for help, I'm going to just briefly cover this in general. You can reach out to your community, right? So you can reach out to, if your company has an EAP, you can reach out to that employee assistance program. If you have a family physician or pediatrician, you can reach out to them for help around mental health and wellness. You can even reach out to Mental Health Association Oklahoma and other national entities that I'm going to share here today to get information and support and education around mental health. You, of course, can reach out to your family and your friends. Again, I want to encourage you to reach out to those that are safe and helpful. and are going to be having your best interest at heart. And then I know it may seem strange to have you on there, but you can do whatever you want, but you can look to yourself and say, okay, what can I do to help myself, right? And that's self-care. What can I do to help myself? And I mentioned those earlier. Is it taking a walk? Is it reading? Is it spending time with your kids or your puppies or your cat, right? So I have specific things that I've figured out now. When I'm feeling anxious, it's best for me to do yoga. If my stress levels are high and I'm overwhelmed, it's best for me to go for a hike, right? So I figured out, not just what are the things, but what specific thing helps with specific stressors that I may feel. So here are a couple national resources that I highly recommend. Mental Health America is actually our national umbrella. We are an affiliate of Mental Health America here at Mental Health Association Oklahoma, and they provide exceptional resources, information, screenings, research, referrals to services if you call them. They are highly helpful and full of information. NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Illness, is also a national organization, but we actually also have chapters here in Oklahoma, and we have a specific Tulsa chapter. I actually serve on that board, and we're doing wonderful work. We've done some education, and we have these great support groups, and we do legislative advocacy, as does Mental Health America and Child Mind Institute. Tulsa National Alliance on Mental Illness, it has its own website. You can just Google it and see what they are up to, and if you would be interested in supporting them. They're parent and family members supporting their loved ones with a mental health disorder, although they do offer help specifically for people that are struggling with mental illness. And then Child Mind Institute, it is all things child. I absolutely love this. It's one of my Facebook follows. I follow them. They're usually at the top of my page, right below my favorite NFL football team. And they give great information on parenting, child development, and mental health support around all things children and adolescents. And they have exceptional little videos that they do, and they've started doing them in Spanish, which is wonderful for our Spanish speaking communities here in Oklahoma and in Tulsa. I'm going to show you a couple of their screenshots just so you can see. Mental Health America has a number of screenings that you can do, or you can do with a youth or a loved one. This list goes on beyond what I could put on the page. We also, Mental Health Association, does a screening that's comprehensive for youth, 11 to 24 years old. We can do this virtually, and we screen for things such as anxiety, depression, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, even ask questions about hearing and seeing and asthma. We're really just looking at those things that kind of hinder education process for kids, right? But really leaning toward the mental health. And we ask about suicidality. And I actually did these screenings in our student mental health program before I was in this role. And this is under my division. And it has been such an incredible tool and has literally saved the lives of many young youth in Oklahoma. National Alliance on Mental Health, NAMI, it says health, it should say illness, my apologies. They offer so much, again, an excellent resource, many programs here that you can learn from, you can join and find support. All of these are education programs. NAMI in Your Own Voice teaches you, when you've experienced a mental health disorder, it teaches you how to share your story for the community and for legislators. And the NAMI Smarts for Advocacy is specifically for advocacy, sharing your story, but going beyond that. So lots of opportunity to get involved with mental health and wellness there. And this is a quote from Child Mind Institute. Below this quote are multiple screenings, multiple information about different topics that kids may be experiencing, may be struggling with, and then Then below that, multiple topics on types of disorders and symptoms and challenges that, so you kind of have the, you know, like you might have grief and bullying and experiencing, and then in the next level, it has the diagnoses, you know, so anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder. It's going to go into depth about those. So in the relationship dynamics, I'm gonna run through this real quick. I'm gonna be mindful of my time. I'm going to talk about relationship quality and communication patterns, right? So we relate to one another, and communications is the vehicle by which we do this. And communication is not just the words we say, but as my mother says, it's not just what you say, it's how you say it. So we have these overt and covert messages, right? So overtly, I may be saying to you, did you send that file? I didn't get it, right? But covertly, I may be trying to communicate that I don't feel that, you know, trying to communicate something like, not just that I didn't get the file, but man, you haven't done it again. Like this is the 10th time I've asked this, right? And it can be, or it can be, hey, I know you're super busy, but I'm just needing that file. And so I'm just, you know, gently reminding you. So we have these covert and overt communications in most of our engagements when we communicate with one another, because our brains are always rapidly firing. So it's important to think about how we're communicating and communicating clearly, right? So we have those overt and covert messages, and we also have what we're saying and what we mean, right? And so sometimes if you've ever been in an argument with someone, I'm sure nobody here has, you know, you say something, another person, if you've had any therapy, says, what I hear you saying is, and you're like, no, that's not what I said at all. That's not it. And so that's what we're talking about. And when we're talking about what intent and content, right? So we have intent, you know, and the content is there, but maybe our intent isn't being read right with the content. And so there's a couple of things that really direct this. And this is where I'm going to get a little nerdy on you. But we have these areas in our communication, right, that influence our communication, and we don't really think about it. The fact of the matter is emotion and meaning and power impact the way we communicate in our roles with one another. And if we can stop and think about this a little bit, it will help you shift that intent and content and overt and covert in the way you engage with others. So emotion, how we express our emotions, right? So I don't know about you, but unfortunately I'm one of those people that whatever I'm feeling, it's right there on my face. And so how we express our emotions is very important. And it's important for us to bring clarity to that and make sure that our expression is matching what we're meaning to communicate. Regulation, emotion regulation. You know, I grew up, I'm Italian, Scottish, and Irish. So it's kind of a big joke that we talk a lot and we're very emotional and we use our hands when we talk. And so emotion regulation was an interesting concept for me to learn about. And it's the idea of all those things when people say, learn to meditate, learn to do yoga. That's all bringing emotion regulation into your life in a very physical way. You can also do this in a mental way where you can use positive imagery. When I use positive imagery, I don't just think of my happy place, right? I don't just close my eyes and think of the beach. I actually go there in my imagination in my five senses, right? So I am feeling that warm sunshine. I am hearing the waves come in. I am tasting the salt air. I am smelling the drink in my hand. I am hearing, I missed one. Feeling, hearing, touching, tasting. I don't know, I think I missed one, but you get the point. Meaning makes a difference in the way that we communicate. And our meaning is, everybody makes meaning. We've all made meaning of the pandemic, maybe multiple meanings as we progress through it. We've made meaning of this weather we're having. We're making meaning of the weather we're getting ready to have. We are making meaning of the racial tensions in our country. we made meaning of our morning. How did our morning go, right? So we make meaning to every situation we engage in. And the two of the things that influence meaning are your worldview and your personal identity. So your worldview is it can be your faith-based, it can be influenced by faith-based, but it can also be influenced by your upbringing, the way you parent or were parented. It can be influenced by your culture, your race and ethnicity. It can be influenced by your political views. So all of those come together to create a lens right in front of you when you're making meaning. And your personal identity. Who do you think you are? Who would you say you are? Will influence what meaning you make when you communicate. And power structure. Whatever your rules are will come into play on how communication is received. And also boundaries. Again, we're talking about boundaries that are there to create structure, right? And to create stability and safety. And so what those boundaries are, whether those are creating safety, stability, and structure, or whether they're lacking and there is no safety, stability, and structure, can create an impact on your communication and how you're relating to one another. So my mantra today is just to take time throughout your coming weeks to think about your emotion, your meaning, and your power in your communication engagements, and how that's affecting you as an individual, how it's affecting your relationships, and then being mindful and intentional about reaching out and engaging either with us or those resources I gave you previously, or if you were a loved one or in a suicide crisis, the Suicide Prevention Lifeline is available 24/7, and you can always text the crisis text line and get connected immediately with a counselor. And those are available both 24/7 and can be very helpful if you're in a crisis. But I'm excited that you all will hopefully go forward and use the lens of emotion, meaning, and power as you try to communicate and think about the way you're engaging in your relationships, but also in the ways that maybe it's impacting you and how you can best take care of yourself through this situation as well. And I will wrap it up with that.
Great, thank you. I'm going to go back to view everyone because I like to do that. So Rebecca, I heard you talk about using emotion, meaning, and power as tools. I also heard you several times use the phrase safety, stability, and structure. And we are in this really crazy time where all of those things are at risk. Can you help me connect the dots again between how do we increase our feelings of safety, stability, and structure when we're in this really crazy time?
Right. So first and foremost, your safety, stability, and structure is in your home, first and foremost. So for being able to create safety, stability, and structure in your home is going to be vital for you and for your family members. And so that may look like, okay, plan A, plan B, plan C. Plan A, everybody's home. This is what our routine is going to look like. This is what our expectations are. And this is how we help each other and ask help for each other, right? Literally being very intentional and making a plan. Same for, routine B. Okay, so some of us are at school, some of us are not, some of us are at work, some of us are not. And plan C, all of us, traditional life, typical, we'll go back to the routines and schedules that we've worked. We all created a routine and schedule. We have rituals with our family, or hopefully you do. And I can touch on that as well. You naturally created those as you went along and found your way. We all know we don't have a playbook for parenting. And so we all kind of, we did a play and it kind of worked, but not great. Let's adapt it and see if that works next time. And of course we can look to the experts to get some guidance, but each family is unique. And so really setting, that routine expectation and maybe some alternatives, because like I said, you already have a routine that you created and expectations that you created, but a lot of the environment has shifted a lot. And so being able to shift with that is important. And when I mentioned rituals are those things that you do on a regular basis with your family that have a significant emotional meaning to you, that creates togetherness and cohesion and gives a sense of belonging and value to the relationships in the family. So that's going to be, for an example, we're a family of faith. So every night we pray together, but we don't just pray together. We also have, they do handshakes with dad. So they've got their, little like snapping thing that they do with dad. And then we have a cute little kiss. We have all girls. So I do cute little kisses with them. Like I have one that loves Paris. So it's, the little French kiss thing on each side of the cheek. And I had one that used to bonk heads all the time when we were little. So we bonk heads and say goodnight. Not hard, just a gentle bonk. And so that kind of routine brings meaning and connection. And if you don't have something like that, and you have littles, I definitely encourage you to find something to implement that's meaningful to you all. If they're older, bring them in and say, hey, I want to have some connection with you. I don't feel like we have the connection we could. And I'd love to start doing something together on a weekly or daily basis. What are your ideas? And see what they bring to the table. You might be surprised. Kids want connection. They're also building autonomy during those adolescent years. So it feels like they don't, but they do.
Loving your stories of rituals. And it reminds me, my dad, every night when he put his bed said, sleep tight, I love you, don't let the bed bugs bite. And so every night I was told, don't let I didn't even know what a bed bug was till I grew up, and they're now actually a little bit of a problem. But yeah, I love that. So, and you mentioned parenting, and I think that has been one of the biggest aspects of this is families with children at home seem to be struggling more than almost anyone. And that safety, stability, structure has been so difficult for them. There's so many concerns around the expectations of school and learning. And yet, I've also seen the opposite, like every once in a while, it's good to blow up those systems and structures and have a play date. So what do you recommend for families to keep sane as far as keeping their expectations realistic?
Absolutely. So one of my catchphrases is grace and space, right? We need to provide grace and space for ourselves and for others, especially children. Children have not had, 30, 40, 50 years to gain skills to cope with this level of transition and change in our world. So they need an extra dose of grace and space. And when my kids were younger, we had crazy hair days. And those crazy hair days were when we just kind of shut down the outside world and we came in and we just did whatever. Sometimes it was read a book all day long together. Other times it was binge watch a favorite show. Other times it might be playing games all day. And so those crazy hair days, they're very important, and we all need them on occasion. And so being mindful and recognizing when your thermometer starts getting pretty high in your family, let's take a crazy hair day and just, and of course, call it whatever makes sense for you all. I have, again, all girls. So sometimes we have that crazy hair day, and literally and figuratively. And so finding that and letting them know that that's possible. I've also done things which was very fun when they were younger, particularly where I would just plan a weekend getaway. And on Friday, I'd be like, okay, everybody pack. We're going to Missouri, or we're going to Arkansas, and it was good for them to learn, that we need structure, but we also need spontaneity. And those are two balancing points of wellness for all of us.
Great. If anyone in the call has a question, I welcome them. But while you're thinking about that, so the other group that has outsized power over our lives are employers, right? Some of us are bosses. What can we do to both balance that safety, stability, and structure in workplaces that are also kind of uncertain days versus allowing that grace and space, which I love? So what do you see bosses being able to do? You mentioned you were grateful to yours as well.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm kind of the Energizer bunny. I don't sit down well. I don't sit well. I want to be active and busy. and was very active and busy when we first went to remote, well, actually throughout being in remote working. But when we first went, I was extremely busy, and my boss called me and said, you have to take a day off. And I said, okay, I will. He said, no, what day are you taking off next week? I want you to tell me right now what day. And of course, he said it with much more, if you know my boss, Mark Davis, he said it with much more, humor and fun. And I said, okay, yeah, it looks like I can clear my schedule on Tuesday. And he said, okay, good. I'm glad. He was, if you can find another day, take that day off, because I was working way over time, and I had comp time that I could use. And so that was grace to me. That was grace to me. So figuring out, what is grace and space to your team, and giving that. I know we still have production, right? We still have to be productive, but also finding how to balance grace and space. And then if you're communicating the other direction to a boss, really figuring out what it is that you need and taking it to them with this is what I would like, and here's why I would like it. And in exchange, I think what I can bring is. And so if you can show that exchange for just about any boss, hopefully they would be understanding, and they would be able to, they may say, okay, I can't do this, but I can do that. And would that work for you? So just really kind of getting it written out, what you're needing, and communicating that, thinking about your communication, about the dynamics, the power structure, the emotions, regulate those emotions, make sure your expression is what you want it to be. And think about your meaning, what meaning you intend to convey, and think about the roles and rules and the boundaries within your particular corporation, both directions, whether that's as a supervisor or speaking, as a subordinate. Either way, it can be beneficial to be intentional and mindful about those lenses as you communicate, so that you can communicate as clearly and productively as much as possible.
And I often find it helpful to have a good friend who's gotten the old Dr. Philism, no dog in the fight, to bounce my sort of my impression and my plan for communication off of them. Because so often when I'm in my feelings, I'm not seeing the situation as clearly. So I've often found it helpful. I'm lucky to have lots of good friends in that way as far as my social support goes. I would love to hear from some of the people on the call what you have successfully done to find balance or boundaries during all of this time. For instance, as you're talking, I'm realizing how much my time off circulated around travel and going places. And since I don't do that anymore, it is hard to take time off. So I have found that a boundary for me has been kind of following my energy and knowing that all the work will get done and it doesn't all have to happen between 9 and 5. So I'd love to hear from somebody else. You can put it in the chat thread if you want to type, or if anyone would like to unmute themselves and share a boundary or a strategy for balance, I'd love to hear it. I've not been as successful with screens boundaries. I have tried and I'm failing that one. Anyone have a boundary or a strategy?
So Wendy, one of the things that I will say I loved your question about kids and the pandemic and everything. I had listened to Michael Phelps talk about some of his depression and his kids, and they talked about the lion's roar that they did. And one of the things that my son does, and I don't know that he realizes he's doing it, but he yells a lot while he's playing on his computer, on his gaming, and he'll come out and he is yelling, and it's driving us insane. But listening to what Michael Phelps said, I realized it's release. And I didn't know that until I heard him say that. So I had to use that to explain to my husband. I think that's one of his coping mechanisms, but I had no idea.
So just kind of reframing something that was annoying to you as recognizing that's part of his mental health strategy.
But had I not heard Michael Phelps talking about the roar for his kids, and that was an outlet, I would not have known that.
Yeah.
And that is an excellent example of shifting your meaning, right? So you had meaning at one point, and then after gaining some insight, you were able to shift meaning, and that helped you with your emotional response. It's such an excellent example of exactly what I'm talking about. But also, speaking of yelling, not yelling at each other, but just yelling. I have one kiddo that when it's nice, she goes to a field nearby and just yells. I have an employee, a staff member, that she yells. She tells her kids, I'm going to yell, and they do it in the car together sometimes. But every night at 8 p.m., she just like yells to release all the stress, just to release all the stress. And then she can, like Wendy said, the energy, just can allow that to settle and to become peaceful again. And so, yeah, you just got to find what works for you.
Well, the time went so fast. We are at our designated ending hour. I want to thank you, Rebecca, for coming to share your wisdom. I took some notes. I snapped some pictures of some of your screens. I'll be posting the recording with some of those pictures on our Facebook soon. I hope everyone will join me next week when we hear from Sophia Pappas about the best birth to age 8 strategy. And then I also want to say that March 23rd will be the date for the QPR suicide prevention training, with people under so much mental health stress. I think any of us who are friends, congregation members, employees, bosses, this could be super helpful for those situations as well as for our own families. So QPR training March 23rd, if you'd like the registration information, that'll be going out, but you can get it right now by emailing wendy@leadershiptulsa.org. Rebecca, thank you for being with us. Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend. Stay warm, stay safe, stay home if you can. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks.